Alrighty, good afternoon. This is Nick from Beer and Broadband. I'm super excited for today's conversation. I'm live at Mountain Connect and, of course, with beer. And you know what we do here. We educate, we inspire, and we entertain. And these three gentlemen, I think we'll do all those three. I'm not sure which one will do which, but we'll still have a good time. So before we go any further, let's do introductions. I'll start to the gentleman on my right, Bill.
Thanks, Nick. Bill Blackford from Farmers Telephone on FTI Wi-Fi. Announcing that today. A small ISP in Southwest Colorado.
Awesome. And congratulations on the announcement. That'll be great. Nice. Breaking news up here.
Breaking news, yes.
Dun, 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 dun. All right.
Yeah, congrats, Bill. Thank you, Nick. I'm Josh Orlowitz. I'm the Director of Corporate Strategy and Product Management at Bonfire Fiber. I'm so excited to be on my first one of these.
Awesome. And I think if, I don't want to spoil the news, but there was some announcements about Bonfire Fiber that came out yesterday and today. So maybe we can talk about that later. But before we do that, the far gentleman on my right.
Hey! Hey, I'm Mike Edel. I'm the VP of Operations for Bonfire Fiber, and I'm happy to be here with the company. I've been for 6 months and excited to talk about things that Nick brings up.
There we go. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining. Obviously, it's like fiber. I feel like, good thing the bathroom's going to be close. It's all this fiber, right? No? Too much? No, don't. Shh. Okay. Strike one. All right. Well, guys, thanks for joining. So I want to start off by talking about, and Bill, I guess for you specifically, obviously new name, new business, but talk to me a little bit about what's happening in the rural broadband market today. From what are you seeing?
Yeah, rural America is one of those places that's interesting because it's really gone through a significant economic downturn in the last, say, 30, 40, 50 years, agricultural, mining towns, things like that. And we kind of think about revitalization of rural America. How do you make sure that gets developed in the right way? And I think what we saw through COVID was there was a lot of kids, especially in rural America, where they didn't have access to good internet connections and therefore really got left behind.
Yeah.
Also,
elderly too, right?
What's that?
Elderly too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so when you kind of think about not only people who want to live in rural environments and revitalize that kind of rural space, you're also talking about leveling the playing field, whether it's somebody trying to sell something. Maybe they don't have the ability to go to a farmer's market, but now they can, if they have a good internet connection, they can sell something online, even if they're, 50 miles away from town. Kids now can have access to, potentially educational opportunities or the ability to stay at the family farm while they're, taking classes maybe for school, and also integrating those innovative ways, smart technologies into their farms, making them more productive. So there's a lot of neat things happening. The big factor is how do we ensure that they're connected? And that's what we're excited to be able to do, at least in our little neck of the woods, is hopefully be able to build out fiber and speeds that really help connect those people and level the playing field.
That's awesome. I guess, and this question to Josh, I think we can all agree that fiber is important in these areas, obviously where Bill's talking about. How do we make this, what's the model? How do we make fiber, there's a lot of money in the market, but how do we make that model work for the people that Bill just talked about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that if you think about the market, there's two broad stroke models. You've got what we all know is a vertically integrated operator, so your typical cable company or telephone company, right? But what's coming to market, and we're talking about it a lot today at this conference, is open access. And that's what we do at Bonfire Fiber, is we do open access fiber operations. And really, there's not a one-size-fits-all. And so I think for a really remote area with low density, very few homes, I think it makes the open access model a little bit more difficult, right? Because for that model, you've got multiple ISPs or providers vying for the homes and businesses that you're passing. And so for them, there needs to be some critical amount of market, or TAM, as we like to call it. And so I think that the really cool thing about the industry is really that there are a bunch of different business models open, and you can really think through and run the math and the modeling to see what one is best served for each area, right? And so that's the cool thing about about this. And so we are, we have a broadband planning division, so we help ISPs of all sizes think through the right model to go to market with. And the key thing that we do on that side of the house is we're agnostic, right? We let the numbers do the talking for our clients.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you talk about there's different ways to look at this, but what should someone consider, if they're not familiar with open access, they don't know what this is, and they're trying to, why would it even be attractive for an ISP to get into this market? Because I mean, obviously, if you think about, there's a lot of vendors, a lot of companies here at Mountain Connect. Why would it even be attractive?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Nick. So there's kind of two reasons I think about it. One is it allows you to kind of expand your market. So you might have a capital plan where you've got a certain number of homes passed, but you want to bring in some incremental revenue and use your operational synergies. You could get on a network where you don't have to actually build any homes. You can almost think of it like a plug-in at a data center, right? Plug into our platform.
Yep.
And then you can get access to our network of homes passed, right?
Okay.
The other one is a kind of I call them virtual ISPs.
So let me just stop you there for a second. So in that scenario, so if I'm an ISP, like the value is, I don't have to spend much money building a network.
Right.
I mean,
You focus on.
I can just, I'm gonna do, like Bill talked about, the people, the kids that want to stay on the farm, or the elderly people. Like, it's focusing on those people in the community versus trying to figuring out how am I going to build all this stuff.
Yeah, because we think about fiber, and we're seeing this a lot more and more. It's an infrastructure class asset. So toll roads, airports, bridges, things like
Right.
that. So there's a certain class of investors and operators that really focus well on an infrastructure layer, right?
Yep.
And so by disaggregating the layers of this service, we think about in three. We've got that infrastructure layer, that operations layer, so that's what Mike's team does, is putting that equipment on, shooting waves through the fiber to make it usable, and then that retail layer, which is, Bill, you do all three in your territory, but you also have a little bit of open access as well, and on that you're the retail layer. And so what that allows you to do is, for an ISP who wants to expand, or maybe they're capitally constrained, but they still want to service more homes and do that, they can come in and plug in without that strain of $1,500 a passing.
Yeah, and I think, and maybe this is a question for you, Mike. When we think about the operations element, or Bill, an ISP today, or just in general, there's so much money that's coming down. I mean, a big part of this conference is about BEAD and the amount of that money. The governor was here earlier talking about it. But I think sometimes people get confused by, just because you have a lot of money, that doesn't solve all the problems.
No, not at all. And let me jump in real quick, because I think,
obvious hat,
intention is big. And when you think about open access, right, we talked about this a little bit earlier, in fact, a lot today, is, what's been the apprehension of open access in the past?
Yeah, it was just big in Europe.
Yeah, well, why, America's a little different, right? I guess, right?
No
I mean,
way.
yeah, right. Free-spirited, we want to do things, we want control, right? Exactly. And so one of the things that I think open access does, it allows companies who are have good intentions and missions be able to play in those spaces that they otherwise couldn't do, right? So at Farmers, we really pride ourselves on the fact that, we're over a century old. Our focus have been to serve rural community as a community-minded company, right? So our focus is, how do we be a good neighbor? And a lot of big providers and maybe bigger invested companies, not to say that they're bad or they're wrong, they're typically only looking at their bottom line. They're not necessarily looking at their neighbor to their left or right, or maybe, hey, I got to go to the grocery store and actually see this customer, right? I have to go to school or a church or wherever you're at. And so there's a different level of accountability and care and intention. And so for us, it's really important because it allows us as a smaller provider to be able to play at the same level as a giant company in our markets. And that's what's exciting for us at Farmers as far as open access.
I think that's an interesting angle of just accountability, because you don't really, obviously there's giant internet service providers, and sometimes you can be a, nameless or faceless, person out there in the big ecosystem, but accountability. So if somebody wants more community minded, they're more purposeful, they want to be a part of it. Now operationally and from a modeling perspective, they have that chance, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about voice over IP and how many players are out there. Ring Central, 8x8, you can name them all, and they're using the same infrastructure to get to everybody, right? Yeah. And that's the way it is. On the broadband side, but they need that broadband connection from somebody, right? Whoever the customer has, what's your broadband connection, and that's how they get in, right? But now, that consumer has the ability to select whoever that they want. From an ISP standpoint, and it's kind of, as I'm working with ISPs in a particular market, it is really trying to help them understand that this is a good thing for you, the ISP, right? Because whatever your service area is right now, wherever we build, you're going to get that service area if you want to be in the marketplace. Right. Secondarily, if your current provider, however you're getting to the destination, to the customer, is lower speeds and stuff like that, if you come on the marketplace, you can sell to your existing customers at higher speeds, because we'll sell you the services at wholesale rate so you make money, right? Now you're increasing value to your customer. You're giving them more of what they want, right? The ability to do more things off a bigger connection. And then lastly, it's actually, you don't have to worry about the network. Today, however you're getting it, you may have a good experience, you may have a bad experience, but it's all about, let us operate the network. You take care of the customer. It's your customer. You build them, service, exactly. So there's a clear demarcation on where Bonfire helps, and then where the ISP, the internet service provider, actually deals with it. And it's hard to get that through some ISPs out there.
Do you think, I guess I'm curious for Bill, like, I mean, obviously, you know, when you think about the applications, I mean, you talked about VoIP, but like, all the things that are existing now that didn't exist 5 years ago, and you know, whether it be remote education, all these different things, where do you see, like, is it important for the ISP to start having more time? I guess I'm thinking about open access and time, like to give you back time to work on the things that you really want to do. Is that important from an ISP perspective?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. You know, this is gonna be a really long-winded answer, right? Okay. So drink your beers. Everybody drink. Yes, come back.
Everybody take a swig.
And the reason why is because when you kind of think about what you talked about as far as when you think about open access as an ISP and the differentiating factors, so whether it be our local customers are calling local people, right? So when we think about as an ISP in an open access network, there's the differentiating factors, right? A big company might come in and want to be on that network, and that's fine. So what are you competing against? You're competing against customers' experience, right? And differentiating factors, like if I pick up the phone and I call farmers, hey, I'm talking to somebody in my town local, and I can stop by their office and say hi and chat and those kinds of things. But from a cost perspective, back to time, it also comes down to who the operator is. A big apprehension in open access has always been trust. We heard it today in that forum about control, right? And previous providers have struggled with, I don't really want to do this because I'm giving control to someone that I don't know.
That's scary.
But that's super scary, right? Right. Let your 16-year-old drive the car, right? So control is something that ISPs have always hold near and dear to the heart. But here's the thing. What I think is exciting, and I'm going to be a little biased here because I'm sitting here with Bonfire, but when you're with...
I'm not going to light you up.
When you're with people who build and design for a living and they're great at what they do and you can trust in their operating model and their product, well, that's a little bit different as a provider to be able to say, hey, yeah, I think I might be interested. Because I've worked in past situations with open access markets where I didn't trust who was building it, and they did put out a bad product, and really you had to go back and fix all the problems, and you're like, you know what, I don't know if I really want to attach my name and my brand to that open access network. So I think that's what's exciting about what you guys are doing, because you're professionals, experts, and you're proving out that this model can work. Where I think in the past it was typically maybe somebody had a grand idea, put together a few people, got a construction company, and kind of piecemealed all of these networks together. No, right? Yeah, exactly. So that's the exciting thing about, I think, where we go now is, can we trust the operating model? And if we can, then I think a lot of other providers will follow suit as far as their apprehensions.
So let me ask you. So this is a question for Josh, I guess.
Can I just say something with Bill?
No, just kidding. Of course you can. No.
Well, it goes back to the ISPs. We have to, we as the manager of the network have to trust the ISPs also, because while the end customer doesn't know us other than we put the drop in, we put an optical network terminal, an ONT in their home, and then all of a sudden their transactions with the ISP, right? The residential gateway shows up. So we want to make sure, and we vet through this process, these ISPs to make sure we're going to check their customer satisfaction from whatever they've been doing. We have metrics that we need to hear from them before we entertain presenting them to the network owner. Do you want them in the marketplace, right? So all our job is to collect the information, rate it, and we built an actual matrix that our customer, Southern Ute in this case, has already approved, and that's what we're going to use to measure every ISP that is entertaining coming on to that particular marketplace. Then we sit down with the client and say, here are the ISPs, and here's how they got rated. Ask any questions. What do you want to do, right? Because in this case, the Southern Ute Indian tribe, it's their network. We're just the operator. So there's a two-way street on trusting the operator and trusting the ISP. We do not want a bad customer experience.
Right, because your name's on that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they know that we brought the drop in, and they heard us when we were building into them and stuff. So, yeah.
No, that's a good point. I mean, you do have to have that symbiote kind of relationship and trust, and that's probably hard to find in some places. So I don't know, it's always a one-size-fits-all in every market, but I think it can work, and it's something that I think we should get excited about.
So let me ask you this: you guys have all, we're not drinking, we're drinking Blue Moon and not Dos Equis, but you guys know the whole most interesting man in the world, that guy. Yeah, I can't remember what his name is, but so Josh, pretend like you're the most interesting man in the world.
That's a stretch for Josh. Come on now. He's actually very interesting. He does.
So, how do you make open access into the what they're just talking about, the trust, the accountability, change a model, move past the numbers? How do you make that interesting? How do you make that interesting to somebody that doesn't understand this? And because there is so much, I think you hit it on the nail on the head, like that symbiotic relationship goes beyond numbers. Yeah.
Well, as a numbers person, I'm going to go right back to numbers. No, but I think like the way I would answer that is in the framework of like who is who, right? So we talk about an owner, an operator, an ISP, right? Okay. And so I think that there's different value and benefits to each player in that stack. So take an owner, right? Whoever that is, a municipality, a private equity firm, an infrastructure fund, whoever, right? The benefits to them economically.
Let's just use a municipality as an example. Okay.
Municipality, their benefits, well, economically might not be the best example, but they can. So what they can do a municipality, they can go through this model, right? They can go help their constituents with a solution that we'll talk about as we move up that stack that's better for them, and I'll talk about why it is better for their constituents. Okay. And then through this model too, there are economic benefits, right? So what we see on open access for an owner is lower churn, higher penetration, and higher customer satisfaction versus...
Which means, let's dummy that down, guys, because our audience, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so what that means basically in layman's is you have customers spending more on your network, and you have them staying on the network for longer and not leaving to go to some other provider.
Churn bad.
Yeah,
staying on good.
Because the provider's there.
They're
so
right there,
what that means is for a municipality, for instance, they're going to often have to go raise a big municipal bond, and that's a very daunting task. And so what you have with those inherent benefits are easier time, less risk paying back that bond. And then for the ISP, you have the ability to not have to duplicate infrastructure, right? So instead of having two companies go build the same home, you can have a better use.
Which I've never, I'm sure we've seen this, right? It's amazing when I see like trenching and like putting multiple trenches for different things. Yeah. Like where, where's the cooperation? Where's
yeah.
the like?
There isn't any. Yeah. One dig rules are very minimal as far as in the United States. I think Idaho,
It's not like
they
the,
did that, but very few states do that, and it's a mess. And then it destroy everybody's network, right? So as an ISP, that's the frustrating thing is you have all of these infrastructures being built. Well, oftentimes they cut your infrastructure,
Right.
and then your customers go down, right? So I think cooperation is the key to also that NPS for the current even provider, right? Because that's very frustrating.
Why can't it be like Lord of the Rings? One dig that rules them all, right? No, not Lord of the Rings. Okay, man, you guys, tough crowd on the movie jokes here today.
The other thing for the municipality, another benefit for them, right, getting the money, having the plant built and all that other stuff, is again a customer satisfaction thing. They're enabling their residential and business customers in their community to have more versatility, of broader selection of whoever they want, better pricing that they're going to get. And so
And just happier citizens.
right, but people in other communities will want to come and live in that community because you've just moved them up, just like enhancing a park or doing all these other things. This really enhances people wanting to move to that community if you can offer that. Yes, exactly.
I was gonna say for you, like that's got to be huge. Like you want people coming into the sound. Like the first thing if I'm gonna buy a house, the first thing I'm gonna check. Broadband?
Right, and especially if you're in the middle of nowhere or you're maybe in that small town.
Yes.
So like we have both, right? So we have these areas where they're 5, 10, 20, 100 acre properties, but we also have inside the city and more density, but you're still talking about a small community. There's not a lot of maybe job opportunity. And when you think about revitalization of kind of rural America, I kind of include the small town along with those family farms because that's the whole ecosystem in rural America.
To connect them together.
Right, to connect them together. But if you don't have good internet connection or a good product, these people will not move there, right? So what we're seeing, especially in COVID, we saw this mass exodus of people moving from large-scale cities, big urban environments to smaller communities, whether that be in that small town or maybe on the outskirts, but they can't do that and work remotely unless they have a connection. Exactly. And so what we're seeing is in a lot of, especially in the Mountain West, a significant increase in population that says, hey, I can work in Cortez, Colorado. So wait a second, do I have an internet connection? Right. And if they do, and it's a quality manner because they require maybe 100 meg or 500 meg, and they're like, wait, I can't move there, then that stops that economic flow, right? Same thing from a business perspective. Do they have fiber? Can I get a gig or 10 gig or whatever it might be? That may be the difference of that community winning a major economic player, whether that be a big business or manufacturing. So those have significant impacts to the economies of small town America.
And the key with that, and you alluded to it on pricing, but just to expand on that piece, right? If you do open access in that community, you're also giving them choice, right? So it's not just like you've got this incumbent provider who is offering whatever service level they want because they can. Well, no, but that's
no, not in the open access area.
Touchy subject.
But you're basically forcing all the ISPs on the network because they have to compete. You've created a competition level now, right? So they have to compete on price, which is what you were alluding to. They have to compete on customer service because now all of a sudden that person has a choice, right? That business has a choice. If I'm unhappy with Nick's ISP, I'm going to move to Mike's.
Yep.
But you have to make that in a way that it makes sense for an ISP too,
Exactly.
right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you have to think both sides of the equation because as a provider, if I
You
can't
still got to
get
make money.
Yeah, if I don't have enough market share, right, to go out and gain a certain amount of customers, even if it's a good choice, I may not be able to afford to really go all in on that option, especially if it's not near me. Let's say you wanted to serve a community within an hour or two from where your base is. If there's not the economics, even though we might have a different intention of a big company and we want to be that community neighborly kind of business, I still have to make enough money to operate, right? I have to break even and I have to convince a board that makes sense. So, we all have those kinds of choices, but I think if it's done right, responsibly, I think they talked about it in the forum today about, maybe limiting the amount of ISPs. I love the idea of maybe vetting the ISP because, again, I think the problem of when you say incumbent, yes, I am in an incumbent exchange in one of my areas. But what we've seen from the big incumbents is that they've lost sight of who's important and what's important. And so a lot of these small communities have been left behind. And those are voids where I think that's what we're talking about. There's opportunity for there to be, whether it's another carrier or an open access network, but there's opportunity there where we can go in and serve that community. And I think, hey, again, collaboration is important, because as a small company, I can't afford to do a $20, $30, $40 million build, but I do have the infrastructure and the people to take care of the customers, do the installs, and make that type of investment, and hopefully partner in a way where everybody kind of wins, and ultimately the community wins, the people win, and that's what we're talking
like putting
about.
the purpose first, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, guys, hopefully the audience has got a lot of good insights and some entertainment out of this. Is there anything you guys want to leave, or anything you just want people to know when you're thinking about these different perspectives, either from the modeling as a provider, as an operations, anything you think, hey, you know what? It's August 2023, lots of investment out there. There's going to be a lot of changes in the next 12 to 24 months, right? And there's going to be we're going to move from a lot of the talk and moving into a lot of the action, we hope, right? What should people consider? What should people be thinking about over the next 6 to 12 months?
I mean, I think, and I'll be quick. I want to make sure.
No,
I want to make sure my friend
No, I
Mike
was
has time to talk.
I was going to probably say the same thing you are. Go ahead.
Something to swallow.
Yeah, I got to finish this too. I think the key thing for me, and I'm more on the business side of it, is just that there are a lot of models, and even within a model, there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, right? With open access, there's a bunch of different variations. And I think the key thing is on the upfront, as you're thinking about whether you're a municipality or a provider, it's just thinking through really hard, like looking, like we're doing, really dig into the numbers to think what makes sense for you, because not every model works in every situation, right? Sure, right. A 10 home town.
Acceptance is the first step in that.
Yeah, a 10 home town, open access is not going to make sense, right? But a 30,000 home is probably a great candidate for it. Right. And so you really need to think through what's best for you, whether you're going after funding and the community. Yeah, exactly.
That's great advice.
Was that what you were going to say?
I was going to say that, but I was going to start a little bit further. Yeah. It's really knowing who your customer is. It's really about, as we work with municipalities and stuff, is understanding what their needs are. That's where it starts, in my opinion, right? And maybe open access isn't what they need. And, we as a provider need to be open with them, right? And say, well, if this is really what you're looking for, this may not be the model that works for you, whether it's density or anything like that. But what problem are we trying to solve for them? And because our mission to the 30,000 plus environments is to build you a network that will last a long time and provide services that your clients are going to need over time, right? Don't think about right here. This money is here, but we want to make sure you're set for out here.
I think if people, I think the word I think they forget sometimes is about legacy, right? Like, think about legacy of beyond, hey, we may be
look at
all
Farmers
gone.
Tell.
Yeah, I mean,
over 100 years.
And that's what I was going to say is, I'm not looking at just a 5 and 10 year, model. I'm thinking 50 years or 100 years, really. I mean, we've existed for a century. How do we exist for a century longer? I think you said it right about the solution, though, and I would just ask the audience to consider all options. I think in the past there's been apprehension for good reason, and maybe there was bias there for other reasons. But I think that where we're at in the amount of money and investment, we have to look at things differently to solve these problems. Maybe one ditch opportunity, maybe it's an open access in one community, but maybe in another it's not. And it's not a one size fits all, because we're the United States of America. There's areas of granite, and there's areas of farmland, and there's areas of sky rises, right? Lava. I don't want to forget about Hawaii. Right. Hey. Yeah. So there's all these different environments, and we have to consider that, just be open and consider all options, right? And look at the numbers. What Josh said about data. don't just make an emotional decision because that's the way you always did it or you're upset about something in the past, right? Don't hold the grudges. Really look at it from the numbers. Let the math equation play a little bit.
It's not my ego. It's an Excel model. It's not.
But it's also about intention and purpose.
Yeah.
And I know Nick and we've chatted about that before, about how important it is to know what your mission is.
For sure.
And if you know what your mission is, then you'll know the direction that you need to go and just consider all options.
Great advice. Well, gentlemen, Bill, Josh, Mike, cheers to all of you. Thank you for being on this episode, and we will see you guys next time.